Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kilowatt, a podcast about electric vehicles, renewable energy, autonomous driving, and much, much more. And if you're like, hey, man, isn't there supposed to be music in here? Yeah, there is. But for some reason, my music's playing really slow, but my interview is playing really fast. So I decided that instead of changing uh, my sample rate to 48 kilohertz, I would leave it at 44.1 kilohertz so that the voices don't sound sped up and funny, and we would just not listen to music at all, which is normally sample rated at 48 kilohertz. Why this is doing this, I have no idea. It's just I'm recording a lot of these podcasts lately, and these are the kind of weird things that come up every now and again. Anyway, on this episode of Kilowatt, we are going to sit down with Glenn Rubin, and Glenn is going to tell us all about his experience off-roading in his Cybertruck. I know many of you enjoy this pastime based on the emails that I've had with you, but even if you're not interested in off-roading, I still think you're going to enjoy the interview. You're going to learn a lot. I learned a lot. All right, let's go ahead and welcome Gene to the show.
Thank you, Bodie. Good to see you again for the second time.
Yeah, this should become a regular every 3 or 4 weeks we get together and chat about the Cybertruck. It's a fun discussion.
Sure.
So last time we just talked about the Cybertruck and your overall impressions, but what you really got this truck for was to do some off-roading and some camping, and now you've had the opportunity to do that. What are your thoughts?
I was very impressed, actually. I came home from that last camping trip, which included some rough roads and stuff. I came home with a big smile on my face because I, of course, had apprehensions. I've owned many sorts of very capable trucks in the past and was worried that this one would fulfill my expectations, and it really did. So we can talk about that as the podcast goes along, but I was pleased.
Excellent. And just so everybody kind of gets a picture in their head, where did you go and what type of terrain did you encounter?
Okay. So I'm in the Ventura, California area, which is near Santa Barbara. And whenever I go on my camping trips, I generally head east, maybe over into the Four Corners area, Navajo, Hopi lands. This one was over into the Eastern Sierra, also known as Inyo County, over by Lone Pine, Bishop, Independence. It's actually a fabulous county, Inyo County. I think it's in the lower 48. It's like the second largest county with the lowest population density. So that's hard to believe here in California, but it is. There's some nice wildlands there. That answer your question?
It does. And I think this is a really big side note, but I think I went to a mule day, like donkey day in Bishop, right? Is it Bishop? Yeah. Okay.
Mule days.
Yeah. My wife and I happened to be driving by and we're like, what is this? Because we used to live in Nevada and we drive back and forth to Arizona when she was looking for a job. And we stopped and we enjoyed, lots of really tasty food and then went on our way.
Yeah. Well, that's the general vicinity for sure.
Okay. Excellent. And then in terms of terrain, were you getting a lot of, because Cybertruck's very heavy, were you in a lot of soft terrain, hard terrain, rocky terrain? What'd you get?
Okay. So on this particular trip, because there were several other people and vehicles that wanted to go along, we didn't go into as rough an area as I had hoped for because we had other people who had like trailers to pull and normal not really off-road capable vehicles. So we actually camped in an area near Independence in a BLM campground at the base of the eastern side of the Sierras. But from there are some roads that travel up into the steeper, portions of the lower east side of the Sierras. This is under Mount Whitney. It's really beautiful. We're under snow-capped mountains in what you kind of call a high desert, around 4,000 feet. Just incredible views in every which direction. And I did make a point, because I really wanted to test it out, to do a nice loop up into the mountains there. It was only about 20 miles, but nonetheless, it took 4 hours to do it because it was challenging. And I have really good feedback I can give you from that. I was determined to get something in that I'd be able to give you some interesting information.
Okay. And what do you got?
Okay. So I'll just start at the beginning of all of that. So what we were traveling on is it's not a graded road. It's just the more off-road stuff is going to be a track, meaning you've got where the left tire runs and the right tire runs from all the trucks that have been there before you. It's not flat graded, so you always have a berm in the middle. And these roads that were going up and crossing some alluvial fan areas of the Eastern Sierra get flooded and washed out. In fact, these kinds of roads, as many of your listeners may already know, may have seen, they actually turn into rivers. So when there's a ton of rain coming off the mountains, it travels path of least resistance. And if there's kind of a road there, that's where the water flows. And so during this 25-mile loop that I did, most of it was more like driving on a riverbed because there had been quite a bit of flooding there. And so it was all very rocky, sometimes with rocks strewn about the size of watermelons, small watermelons, not big watermelons. Can be very steep. And it can also become rutted. Again, some of your listeners may have seen this if they've done off-road stuff, but when you get water flowing down a road, you can get ruts that might be, say, a foot wide and as much as 3 feet deep, where the water has found a soft part of the earth and it really undermines it and stuff. So it was quite rough going. Now, the Cybertruck has had a pretty amazing updates that I just got in yesterday. But for the trip that I did, it was before we had locking differentials. If you have listeners who are familiar with some serious off-road stuff, they know the value of locking differentials if they've ever had them. And so I was driving this on open differentials, and it still did a really, really great job.
Kind of going into this before you started, right? Let's just say you pull off the main road and you're ready to start your off-roading experience. What are some of the worries that you had in the back of your mind?
Well, I didn't have too many worries because I've done this sort of travel all the time, but I was concerned that the suspension just wouldn't articulate very much. When you don't have good articulation, you end up lifting a wheel off the ground a lot. In other words, let's say the right wheel needs to drop down into a gully or something. The vehicle sits on the left side, let's say the left front, and the right one is sort of up in the air. When you have an open differential, the power always goes to the wheel that has the least traction. And you can get in a situation then that you're on basically maybe one wheel drive. If this happens kind of diagonally or catty corner from each other, you can get in that situation off-road easily. One wheel on the front axle is in the air. The opposing wheel on the back axle is kind of in the air because the car is being supported by the other tires diagonally. Well, then the power goes to those two and there's no forward motion. You have a problem. Basically, you can usually roll back in a case like that, but then you have to take a running start on it. And taking a running start off-road over rocks is like, you're just asking for a problem. You're just asking for damage. You always want to go as slow as possible, just creeping along. So that was one of my concerns, that the suspension wouldn't, keep all four wheels on the ground all the time. This is where locking differentials come in. If you have locking differentials and you lift a couple wheels, it doesn't matter. It will still make forward motion because the locking differential sends the power to all four wheels, not just the two that have the lesser traction. And actually, I'd love to talk sometime maybe later on in this about open differentials and why they are the way they are and why they're so much safer when you're on pavement. And that's why most vehicles come that way. But as far as other things, that I was concerned about, really not too much else, but I did learn on the drive about some fabulous things about the Cybertruck, that one in particular that I never really had before in all my off-road vehicles that made this drive really great. And that would be the front camera. That front camera, which up until this point just helped me pull into the garage so I wouldn't hit the back wall, was helpful in a parking lot or getting between two vehicles or something like that, because it is a pretty big truck. And the front camera, it has the lines that you can follow, just like many other cars. They have a reverse camera. All the Teslas, you have a couple of white lines that show you exactly where your tires are going to run. Well, off-road on trails like this, where you have to not fall into ravines that have been cut by the water or get over or around large rocks without doing damage to your truck, it's really common that you're going to have a co-rider, which I did, that's going to hop out, go up ahead with a walkie-talkie, and basically guide me, the driver, a little to the left, a little to the right, guide me through it, basically spotting me. But two things with the Cybertruck: it has that sloping down front hood, so I can see the road in front of me maybe 10 to 15 feet ahead of me. When I've had full-size Fords and Dodges, for instance, with that big hood, you see the road like 30 feet in front of you, and then you've got to memorize that whole thing. So where are the rocks? Where are the crevasses that you have to be careful for? You have to memorize that, or if you're lucky, you have someone to get out and tell you. But the Cybertruck was so easy. No one ever had to get out because I can see the ground up close. And then having that large screen, I don't know how big it is. It's like 16 inches or something like that. I can fill the whole thing with the front camera, and I can see right in front of the bumper exactly what I have to pick my way through, exactly the decisions I have to make. And that was fabulous. I mean, that just made it fun. It made it fun and a whole lot less stressful. That was really helpful. I did, if you look on a Cybertruck, or if you own a Cybertruck, you'll see in front of the front tires, there's a air deflector that comes down under the bumper, or like an air dam. I removed those already. I removed them back at home, weeks before, and left them off. I'm not sure if it makes a difference in range or not. I don't think so, because I'm getting good range. But those come off pretty easily, and I removed those because they definitely would have gotten torn off, without a doubt. And other off-roaders on videos I've seen on YouTube, some people have lost those things on rocks. So I would advise to anybody else, just take them off now before you break them off.
It's good advice.
Yeah.
Okay, so the screen on the Cybertruck's 18.5 inches, so it's massive, much bigger than what's on my Model Y and your Model Y. But so that's really nice that you get all of that real estate on the screen to look and see what's in front of you. What other things did you experience? Because I'm guessing you experienced going upgrade, coming downgrade. You didn't have the new feature that is, I think it's called Trail Assist, which is basically off-road cruise control. You didn't have that. It was all on you to make these decisions. Easy, hard, stressful. What was the experience like driving in those situations?
Okay, so I'd say overall, this drive was less stressful and easier than it would have been in any of my other vehicles I've owned. Mostly because, well, for one big reason, because it's electric. And with a gas or diesel engine, you have a narrow power band. And so you're always using your gears to try and stay in that power band. And a good off-road vehicle is going to have a transfer case, which makes your gears much lower, like cuts the ratio in half of any of your gears. I've always used manual transmissions in all of my vehicles. And so when you have a truck like the Dodge I had before, which was a diesel with a 6-speed manual and a transfer case, it had really, really, really low gears, so it could creep along at 1 to 2 miles per hour and still be in the engine's range. But with electric, you have full torque even at 1 RPM. So off-road, when you need to go really slow, like on something which is sort of like stair steps with rocks thrown all over it, or you can try and go around rocks, but sometimes the only way to get around them is to like go over them, to actually put your wheel on the rock. And you need to go very, very slowly, just really at a crawl, like what a baby would crawl, Doing this with electric, as I expected, was so much easier than doing it with a fossil vehicle. There's no, you don't have to pop any clutches. You don't have to, even with an automatic, when you get up to something that's a little bit tough to get over, you'd have to kind of gun the gas a little bit, and then it's going to sort of jump forward. But with the electric, because it has all the torque, all the horsepower, even as low as 1 RPM, you can really feather your way over anything. And when you come down the other side of the rock, it's nice having the regenerative to braking, to slow you down. So that I found, to make the whole thing a lot easier. I was surprised at the end of that trip that we were gone for 4 hours. I was like, wow, that was 4 hours, because it was pretty stress free. It was pretty nice for only 25 miles in 4 hours. Yeah. On my other trucks, it would have beat me up a lot harder.
Oh, I'd imagine with the air ride suspension is probably pretty smooth in terms of your ride.
Yes, that's true. Also, as I mentioned on the last time I was talking to you with the Cybertruck, is that you can tell that the chassis is really, really stiff. There's no flex there, and only the suspension is moving. I don't know that really adds to the capability of getting through the sort of terrain I went through, but it makes it a lot nicer when you're driving it and you don't feel like you're hearing all these creaks, moans and groans and creaks coming from the chassis. It's just sort of a more comfortable feeling in that way.
Nice. So what other things did you come across in your ride that, or in your adventure that you were like, oh, this kind of surprised me?
Yeah. It would be nice. Okay. Some of the suspension, adjustments, for instance, gosh, I'm not sure where I was going with that. If you're driving it on the road and you're not in off-road mode, if you set yourself for a higher suspension and then you get over a certain miles per hour, it just sort of goes down. So once I realized I really need to be in the off-road mode, and then from the off-road, and this was on the old software, into, I think it was Baja mode, then it would remain wherever I left it. But when we get out of the vehicle, for instance, this was an annoyance. If you get out of the vehicle and you shut it off or put it in park to get out to walk around, stretch your legs and stuff and look around, when you get back in the vehicle, it set it back to, I think, just medium height, for instance. And then you have to go out of your way to go put it back where you left off. I can see that would be an annoyance, and you might carry on the road not realizing that the vehicle is now sitting a lot lower, and you might actually bump into something. This is actually solved on the new software, but that was on the old software. Gosh, I wish there was a lot more to tell you about it. It was just so uneventful, considering it was a really pretty technical road. I have been in worse, but I felt confident that the truck would be able to handle those things. Now with the new software, which I'm looking forward to when we talk about that, I'm going to be really, really pleased to tell you about some things there.
How would you rate the difficulty level for your 20-mile trip?
Right. So old school off-roaders, we always had a 1 through 5 scale, not a 1 through 10. I would say this one was a 4, what I was on. Yeah. It's in case challenging. It's rather steep. We did, this was a loop of 25 miles. And so half of that would be 12 miles. And that was about a 3,000 foot elevation gain. That's quite a bit. And it was only for the very first mile, like rough washboard, but it pretty much turned into river bottom, after that. And we had some river crossings because there was still a fair amount of water coming through, and rocky road, the kind that's rather jarring. In other words, the rocks and the small boulders and the watermelon-sized rocks that I have to get over are sitting on a really hard packed soil, not a softer sand. And people who have done some off-road driving, they know that difference. That makes for a lot more jarring. When you do hit something, there's no deflection of it into the soil. You're going to get the whole brunt of that.
Okay. How would you, I'm curious, is that your thoughts? And it sounds like everything was pretty easy, but could you tell the difference with the steer-by-wire system?
Yes, actually. I really like that. Not so much that you don't get so much kickback into the steering wheel, which can be exhausting, but that it's variable. Tesla has really done a nice job on this. I believe the variability of the sensitivity of the steer-by-wire is dependent on speed. For instance, if you're going slowly in a parking lot, you don't need to turn the steering wheel very much, and you get a lot of steering from your wheels. It'll make a pretty sharp corner. So that makes maneuvering in small places really, really easy. And then as you speed up, say you're on the freeway, it becomes less sensitive. Another thing to note is that if you're going at slower speeds, say in a parking lot, if you turn the steering wheel to the left, the front wheels turn to the left, the rear wheels turn to the right, meaning that the tail end will swing out and around to help you fit into a parking space or anything. When you're at higher speed, if you move the wheel to the left, say you're going to change lanes on the freeway, the rear wheels also turn to the left. So you're just crabbing your way over into the other lane. And it should be that way. That's well thought out. If the wheels did the same thing at high speed that they do at low speed, it would tend to make you want to roll over, actually, if you think about that. It's just going to be too sharp of a turn. So that steering, I thought, performed flawlessly. One of the things I never think about that probably everybody wonders if they'll think about, and I used to think about, this idea of steer by wire. It seems kind of scary, right? I mean, I think it has backup. It's like triple, what do you call that?
Redundancy.
Redundancy. I think it's something like triple redundancy. And then you have to remind yourself that that's the way Airbus airplanes fly, by wire, steer by wire, all that stuff. But the reality is when you're in the vehicle, you never think about that. There's nothing about its performance that made me feel like the car wasn't reacting properly to what the input I was giving it with the steering wheel.
Excellent. What else happened on your trip? What was your spotters' overall impression? Had they been in the truck before, or were they experienced with Teslas at all?
Yeah. So the fellow who was riding shotgun up front, my friend Phil, he's been a long time Tesla fan. He's got a Model 3 long range right now. He had another Model 3 before that, but it sadly got totaled. And he's done a lot of off-road driving. He's been all over Baja, all over mainland Mexico with me, all over the Southwest. He's an avid off-roader. He has a Toyota Tacoma. He does have a Cybertruck on order. He can't wait to get it. And he was really stoked about how well it performed. So he's just chomping at the bit to get one. The other people, there were two other people sitting in the back seat, Bill and Linda. They actually bought my Dodge from me, my previous Dodge 4-wheel drive truck. And that's what they're driving these days. And they've been on a lot of rough roads, also on a lot of trips with me. And they were actually really impressed as well. They really liked it. The fellow Bill, he's an electrical engineer, and that's not quite the same as a mechanical engineer, but he's an engineer all the same. So he was so interested on how everything works and why it works. The thing, just back to the steering, I just want to mention, for the type of off-road work I was doing, I was thinking it would be nicer not to have rear steering. It was never a problem for me. But when you have rear steering, if you're getting yourself to a really tight spot, and you get the front through, you really don't want the back to swing around at all. You just want to go straight, especially if it's a rock you're trying to avoid so that you don't do wheel damage or tire damage. So on this trip, it never was an issue, but I was sitting there telling myself, it would be nice if you could turn off the rear steering, which in the new update, you can.
Oh, nice.
So that's great.
Well, that kind of leads me to my next question, which is what improvements, if you could sit down with the Tesla team and you could have a discussion about what improvements you think they should make to the Cybertruck, what kind of improvements would you suggest specifically about, off-roading?
Right. Pretty much everything that the new update had.
Okay.
But I'll tell you some of them. If that update hadn't come through first, I'd be telling them I'm dying for these locking differentials. And, we don't have autopilot yet, which I really miss. There's a lot of things we don't have yet, which will be coming. All those things I'd miss, but I was just chomping at the bit. I was just hoping that the next update we got would be the locking differentials, because they give me a lot of confidence. You will not get stuck with locking diffs. Wherever you go, it's just literally not possible. There are videos on YouTube you can find of a Cybertruck on an incline stuck in the snow. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, it's only stuck because of the open differentials. I've seen other videos stuck on sort of the kind of terrain I was on. I've seen some in sand that have been stuck, and they were all because they had open differentials. And that makes the difference on a vehicle between something that gets stuck easily and is absolutely unstoppable. Actually, and even on the other vehicles I've had, I only had rear lockers. Most people, if they have a locking diff, it's only on the rear, which makes you 95% unstoppable. But if you have four-wheel lockers, all four of those wheels are going to turn. And unless you're faced into like a giant boulder or a brick wall, the vehicle will go forward. It will get over whatever you put on it. So that would be the main thing I would ask the Tesla engineers to do for me if I was being critical about it, would be I need those differentials. I was so pleased after this 25-mile trip that I did, that I never really got in a situation where I needed the diffs. I never had to back up and take something at speed. But I know that once in a while, if you do a lot of this stuff, the locking diffs are an absolute lifesaver. And you don't want to get stuck 25 miles down a 4-hour road and try and get help. You know, I mean, there's like no tow truck that can come in there and pull you out. You got to be able to get out on your own. Other things would have been to be able to turn off rear wheel steering. Again, on that trip, it wasn't a problem, but I could see how it could be. Another one is I'd like to have the suspension be a lot more flexible, which I haven't been able to try it yet. Flexible meaning that it would articulate to greater extents, have greater travel. But my understanding of the updates is that they do allow for that. And there is a video. Oh, the one that you sent me. Who was that? Was that Redline or do you?
No, that was Top Gear.
Top Gear. Okay, Top Gear did a video of the Cybertruck versus the Rivian, actually. They did a video with the new software. And if anyone's watching that, if you watch the original rock crawling one, that's the kind of terrain I was on for the whole 25 miles. And those things are always much steeper than they look like on video, because I've done lots of videos, really steep stuff, and it looks flat, you know? So they did some pretty rough stuff on it. And also on the Top Gear video, if you're watching that, and if you're not used to doing off-road, they did some high-speed driving also over some, we call them whoop-de-doos. They're like, you know, dips and things that make you think you're going to leave the ground. And they even did a jump with it.
Yeah.
Nobody in real life does that. Don't do that. You know, for one thing, it's just freaking dangerous. You know, you can kill yourself with a wrong move. So I think of that video, Bodhi, that you sent me, the stuff that people should really pay attention to that was really well done is the first segment of the video where they're doing the rock crawling. For me, because that's the kind of stuff that I would do, they did it at low speed. They did it really well. And they also removed the air dams from below the bumper in front of the rear tire that you'll notice. They did the same thing that I was recommending earlier in the interview.
Excellent. Do you want to talk about the open differentials since we're kind of on that topic anyway?
I do. This is something I just really want people to understand for their own safety. Okay. All cars, every car on the road has a differential in whatever the drive axle is. The reason it's there is if you're going around a corner, think about it. You're in an intersection, you make a right turn. Think about, let's just talk about the back axle. That's where a two-wheel drive car, rear-wheel drive will have a differential. The rear tire and wheel that's close to the curb is going to move very slowly. The one that's on the outside, so you're making a right turn. The one on the right side will move slowly. The one on the right side, the left side, has to go around a much larger radius, and it needs to turn maybe 3 times as many times around to take you around that right turn. Now, open differentials are designed for cars that drive on the road, on pavement, and so they send the power to the wheel that has the least amount of traction. And they do this for this reason that I will tell you. Imagine being on a windy mountain road that's slick with water or ice, even worse ice. And it's a windy road and you have a big drop off that if you went off, you're going to be dead, just right off the cliff, right? So if you're driving down this road with an open differential, again, that differential sends the power to the wheel that has less traction. Even if you're in 4-wheel drive, it's only going to send the power to the wheel up front and the wheel in the back axle, the ones that have the less traction, because the wheel that has the wheel end tire that has the more traction is what's keeping you from flying off the curve right off the edge of the cliff. With a limited slip differential, or if you lock up your differential, it's going to send the power, with a limited slip, it sends the power to the wheel that has the greater traction, or to both wheels if it's a locking differential. But either way, if you're on a curvy road and you're driving with differentials locked or limited slip, it's dangerous in the sense that if you give a little bit of power, not even a lot, especially with an electric motor, if you give a bit of power and you're on ice, you're going to break that wheel away. You're going to break the traction even a little bit. And if you do that at the moment that you're on a curve, you're going to fly right off the edge of the mountain. That's it. And for this reason, vehicles, even if you're buying 4-wheel drive, Ford truck or Dodge, Chevy, whatever, Toyota, you almost never have the option of actually locking differentials because the manufacturers don't want that liability of sending you off a cliff. I was really impressed that Tesla actually gave us actual mechanical lockers, not what Rivian does, where they use they'll use software to try and give you what's called electronic traction control, which once you're off road really doesn't work as well, but is safer when you're on the road. Tesla really gave us it's hardcore off-road stuff to have actual locking diffs, and it can be dangerous if you don't use it right. So I wanted to give this little speech so people don't use it the wrong way and kill themselves. It's really to get you through the really difficult terrain, and then you want to turn them off right away. So.
Excellent. No daily driving with the locking differential.
Don't do that. And if you try and do it on pavement anyway, you're going to damage the vehicle incredibly. Imagine go back to that tight right corner where you have a differential. This allows the left wheel and the right wheel to travel at different speeds. If you have locking, they have to turn at the same speed, which means something's going to have to give. You make that curve and you have a heavy vehicle on tires that are getting good traction. Usually you're going to end up bending up one of the axles, one of the half shafts, or breaking a constant velocity joint. So if you try to drive on pavement around curves with the lockers on, you won't go very far before you've really broken something expensive.
Yeah, we don't want that for sure, especially on a Cybertruck, because who knows how long it'll take you to get you apart and how expensive it'll actually be.
Not to mention how embarrassing it would be.
Sure. Some friends of mine, they have a Jeep, and they used to have a Jeep, and they did a lot of off-roading. It is really nice, the off-roading community, where if you do get into a spot of trouble, there's usually someone around that can help you get out. But the goal is to never get into that. So yeah, it's good that they have the locking differentials.
Right. I'm not the most social person. So the places I like to go to is where there's nobody. So the trails I like to go to, and with my small handful of friends that we go together, it's never these sort of Johnson Valley off-road parks and whatnot where there's a lot of people around, or popular trails. If it's a popular trail, we generally don't go there. So we many times might be 50 miles to the next person, or even more at times. And I also I've done a lot of Arctic traveling up in the Arctic, where we're talking rough dirt roads that can go into the hundreds of miles. And so you really have to be able to deal with it on your own. It's great when someone comes along and helps you, but it's just not going to always be there.
Sure. Let's talk about the modes, because you said that you had Baja mode when you were out, but you had to reset it. Did you also have overland mode?
Yeah, you have both overland and Baja. Now, again, this is the old software. How soon we forget things. I think you had to be in Baja mode for it not to keep setting to keep your ground clearance up higher once you hit over 25 miles an hour, 25. I think in overland it would drop you back down to medium again. And I can't remember, and there's no way to figure that out since I've already done the software update.
When you're in these modes, do you get a pitch and a yaw because you want to know what angle you're climbing this rock at, right? You don't want to go too far over, or is that just all natural?
You just feel that.
You just feel it. There's nothing in there that tells you, hey, you're at this degree, at this angle.
Yeah, even in the vehicles I've had before, Toyotas and Jeeps and stuff, where they have a pretty high center of gravity. I've never rolled one over. It's pretty rare, but happens sometimes where you're wondering if you're pushing it a little bit, but you have no choice. It's like, I got to get from here to there, and it's pretty steep. So, when people talk about off-road, we're always on a road. We're just on some dirt track. It's technically a road. Someone's done it before, right? So if someone's done it before and they're not laying at the bottom of the ditch, you'll be able to do it too. You'll be able to do that. The people that get in trouble are the ones that actually leave the road and they try and make a new road. And then suddenly they're traveling someplace where no one's ever been before, which is illegal in most places and just immoral. I mean, the world's full of car tracks all over the place. Please, we don't need to make any more. But so in the case of the Cybertruck, with the batteries on the bottom and stuff, and on that particular trail, I was never in a situation where I was leaning all that far, but I can't imagine ever there being a point where I'd feel like it might roll over on its side. That wouldn't be like.
Okay. Anything else about the overland and Baja mode we should know? New, otherwise?
Of the new stuff, I have great things I can tell you. Yeah.
Okay, go.
I kind of wish I was sitting in the car going through it, but I'm not, so I can't.
Would you like to pick up your phone and walk in there? We can do
you know what I think I can do on my laptop right here? Yeah, this could be really great. On my laptop, I actually saved a picture of that. So let me just get to that real quick. So here's some features that are really nice. Well, you asked me about what I would have asked Tesla, to do, what improvements Tesla could do when I had the previous software, of course, was the locking differentials. We now have that. It kind of there's so many options on here. I don't want to go through every one of them. It'll just bore everybody to death. There's
Sure.
two basic off-road modes. One's called Overland and one's called Baja. And with each one, you can make sort of different settings. The gist of it is that the Overland would be used more on a graded dirt road, might have occasional dips and stuff. A situation where you'd be traveling at a bit higher speed, basically graded dirt, gravel, washboard roads. And when you're there, it has different surfaces that you can choose: all-purpose, rock, gravel, sand. And that adjusts the suspension a little bit differently, just so the vehicle has better control depending on those. When you're in the Baja mode, then that gets one is a bit more technical things. And that would be, you'd be driving at slower speed over a lot of rocks, climbing along at very slow speed, which is pretty much what I was doing. And on Baja mode, you have the choice of having the differentials. You can have them open, you can have the rear one on, or you can have them all on. And you can actually do that in the Overland mode also. So, there's a fair amount of overlap between these two. On one hand, it's a little bit annoying because it gives you something to think about. With my other four-wheel drive trucks, you just had what you had. And then it was just a matter of your skill to get through everything. So this will take me a little while to get used to. And I'm guessing that what I will do is probably just land on a couple of settings that I like to use and just ignore all the rest of them. But things that they did with the new software that I love is, as I mentioned at least 10 times already, locking differentials. I love that we can turn off the rear steering. That's fabulous. And then when one is sitting in their Cybertruck and going through all these different modes, which will be a little bit more up depth than what is on the screen on my laptop that I'm reading out here, is that depending on what modes and what terrain, they give you a little bit of an idea on how the suspension will change. And in the rock crawling mode, for instance, you will keep your four wheels on the ground much better than in any of the other modes. We talked about that before, where I talked about good suspension on a truck means all four tires, all four wheels are on the ground at all times, no matter how twisted the terrain gets. And previously on the Cybertruck, and even the trip that I did, I think I did a couple times, I might have lifted a wheel or something like that. But the Cybertruck can go up really high and go down quite low, which means the suspension has a lot of distance that it can travel. But articulation is something else. It would be like if your left front wheel was really tucked up into the fender because you're taking it over a pretty big boulder, will the right front wheel still be on the ground? And so on the case, I believe that it's in Baja and I believe it's on the Rocky mode. the suspension will push that wheel all the way down until it reaches the ground. It will allow the maximum differential between the left and the right side, which is really great, because previous to that, whatever your setting was for suspension, the wheels would only move up or down maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 inches from that setting. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Or was that
absolutely?
Yeah. Okay.
No, it's good.
In other words, the wheels will go to the maximum extremes that the vehicle allows for. And this is something that off-roaders, we call it articulation. They all know what I'm talking about. It just makes the ride so much better. It makes your forward motion so much easier when you have all 4 wheels on the ground. Other things we have on here is stability assist. And this is something that you can turn off or have down to a minimum. That's really important. And I hope that this applies to ABS braking as well. People get in trouble on, say, gravel roads, washboard roads with ABS braking, because the way ABS works is when you apply the brake, if the brake system feels like any wheel is slipping a little, it actually disengages the brakes from that slipping wheel so that you don't skid out. But when all your wheels are on a washboard and all of them have poor traction and you put the brakes on, like in my Dodge truck, like in a Nissan I had, and like a Toyota pickup I had, you have no brakes because everything is making poor contact on a washboard road. The car doesn't want you to skid out. So it actually reduces your braking terribly. And I did not have this happen to me in the Cybertruck, but somebody else in some video said they had the same problem on the Cybertruck on a washboard road. They applied brakes, and the skid control on the braking basically prevented them from having full braking when they really wanted it. So this stability assist that I see on the software, and I haven't tried this off-road yet, the fact that you can turn off the stability assist, I think that that's what that's all about, is going to stop the anti-skid brakes as well. So that when you apply brakes, whether you have traction or not, those wheels will lock up. You really want to have the ability to do that.
Let's see. Wade mode. You did mention that you went through some water. What is wade mode in terms of navigating through the shallow water?
Yeah. So since I live in Southern California, all my travels are more in the deserty areas. I'll probably never ever use wade. The water that I went through was not even to the bottom of the doors. It was maybe as high as the axles. It wasn't much, but I can explain what wade mode does. Wade mode evidently is supposed to cover you. I can look right here. I'm not sure how many feet, but maybe up to, I don't know, like 3 feet deep or something, like 32 inches deep. Okay, that you can safely travel 32 inches. This is much higher than, say, the battery. And so what wade mode does is the batteries, which are on the floor of the Cybertruck, basically in the middle, they're on the bottom, so the floor, so it's definitely not 32 inches off the ground. All those batteries are in a compartment, right? In their big case. And so wade mode uses the onboard compressor to positively put positive pressure into the battery pack. So any place that water could leak into, it won't, because basically the battery pack is just going to be blowing bubbles, blowing the water out.
That's smart.
That's what wade mode does. I don't think I'll ever be any place where the water is that deep that I'll need to do that. But my understanding, just reading the instructions, it takes a little while to pressurize it. It says you would basically stop. You'd put wade mode on. It says right here it can take up to 10 minutes to fully fill and pressurize the battery pack. And then I assume something on the screen will say, okay, you can drive now. You're pressurized. But that's what that is about.
Oh, okay. So you're not hitting the button and immediately traveling through. You are.
No, according to this, you'd have to wait, which makes sense. You have a compressor that has to charge that up.
Smart though.
Yeah,
smart way to do it. And then this is one of the cooler features, and they talked a little bit about this in the video, and I'll put that video that I sent you in the show notes as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But trail assist, which is like off-road cruise control.
Yeah. So of course I haven't been able to use this yet, but my understanding is you can set it down as low as 1 mile per hour. I can see how this would be pretty nice. I'm not sure if I'll end up using it. It's so easy to drive the vehicle at 1 mile an hour by just barely feathering, the accelerator just lightly. And that's what a person does if you need to go over a boulder instead of around it. Let's say, again, a watermelon-sized rock. If you can't get around it, you can't go over it with the center of the vehicle because it's just too big. Sometimes you have no choice. Put a wheel over it. This is where you want to go really slow. The front wheel's going to have to go over it, and ultimately the back wheel's going to have to go over it. And you want to be able to approach this, come up to it, and go as slow as you can imagine. To go up it, and you want to come down the other side really slowly because you don't want let's say the front wheel, you're getting it over this watermelon-sized boulder. You don't want to come down and have fast and have the suspension compress, and you're going to hit that rock on the bottom of your vehicle and do damage. So you want to come down really slowly. That's where trail assist would work really, really well. I've spent my whole life with all my other vehicles, just doing this by feathering the accelerator pedal just ever so slightly and by having low enough gears and whatnot. And that's how I did it in the Cybertruck. Over all the rocks I had to go over was by barely feathering. So it remains to be seen whether trail assist does this better or if I did it just as well, just feathering. So I'm not sure, but I get the idea. I'm glad they added that. For people that have less experience, it might be a really great thing.
Yeah. And then this is, I don't know if this is my favorite new feature, but as it is one that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy, which is cyber tent mode.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. Do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So actually, that's a really great feature, and that is something I'd hoped for. They call it cyber tent mode, because if you have a cyber tent, which is the tent that fits into the back of the Cybertruck, you can't be in that tent and have the what's that called? The thing that opens and closes in the back of the truck.
The tonneau cover.
Tonneau cover. Thank you. That's a roll down tonneau cover, like when you have a roll down desk, for those who don't know. You really can't have that close up on you because you'll be in the tent. You'll all be squished together, So it keeps that open. But the part about Cybertruck mode, cyber tent mode, that's really great is that it levels the vehicle out. I haven't had a chance to try that, so I'm not sure how steep of a hill you can be on. But that's always the problem if you're sleeping in your vehicle, is trying to get it level. Sometimes you're putting rocks under the tires or pieces of wood or whatever to level it out, because we all know it's really hard to sleep anywhere if you're not level. And so the idea of this, it will use the air suspension and completely level the truck. Rivian has something like that on their truck too. I think they just call it camp mode or something like that. It does a couple other things about, it will keep the electrical outlets on, a few other minor things. What was it about that, Bodhi, that you were most interested in?
Well, two things. One is the climate control, having access to that. And the second was bed leveling, because my wife and I took the kids camping just recently up in Sholo. And the spot that we had for our campsite, we were at a campground, national park or state park. And the spot that we had was not completely level. So where I was kind of at that peak of the pitch. And where my kids were, and my wife was, it was kind of more leveled out. Now, this isn't a lot of space. We're in a 6-person tent, so it's not like it's not like my kids were miles away from me, but it just kind of, for them, it just kind of leveled out a little bit. But for me, it was just like, it was very difficult to get comfortable because I was constantly turning. And then we eventually flipped the direction, like at 3:00 in the morning, that everybody was sleeping, and then everything was fine. But for me, that leveling, because I was like, good Lord, I do not remember camping when I was younger and being like, being a concern ever. I pretty much just slept wherever I slept. But I was like, man, this is I feel like I'm going to roll over on my family in the middle of the night. So
if you can't sleep level, you want your head at the high point. If you're trying to sleep with your head at the low point, it's impossible. And it's really hard to not be rolling sideways. So whatever you do, if you have your head at the highest point, that's your best bet. But just being level, of course, is a luxury.
Yeah, my kids had a reason for wanting to sleep where they slept, and I was like, all right, well, it's probably not going to be as big of a deal as I think it's going to be.
I haven't really even figured out what my whole sleeping situation will be. Um, I do. I guess this is one side of the Cybertruck that bums me out, is that there's no place to put the spare tire other than in the bed of the truck.
Oh, yeah.
And if I'm by myself, that's not a big deal. I don't have to take the tire out of the bed of the truck. But if I was with my girlfriend or whomever, my son or something, and we wanted the whole bed of the truck and we were planning on sleeping in the bed of the truck, we'd have to roll that tire out. That thing weighs 110 pounds, the spare tire. And I did buy, because by myself, I can roll that thing out the back. Let's say I get a flat and I need to use the spare wheel and tire. I can roll that thing out the back and deal with it. But to pick up the 110-pound wheel and put it in, I can do it in a pinch, but you never know. You might hurt your back in your middle of nowhere. So I did buy from Harbor Freight. It was like $40, a little ramp, a folding ramp thing to roll it in and out. And I've tested it that I can do that. And I've tested the jacks that I bought. I tested all the equipment I got for changing a wheel and tire in the wilds. I tested all that out in my driveway to be sure that everything would work. The jack would have enough range and be able to lift the vehicle and everything. But going back to something that I'd like to tell the Tesla engineers, but there's no way they can fix this. This would not be software, would be to fit the spare tire on the Rivian pickup. It does have a space under the bed for a spare, but it has a teeny tiny little bed on it. This is a much larger bed. So even with the spare tire in the bed, I still have much, much more space than the Rivian bed would have had. But as far as what my sleeping arrangements will be as time goes by, I'm not sure. There are some people who are working on some pop-top sort of shell/tent things for the Cybertruck. I also always bring a two-man tent along, because a lot of times after driving a lot in the truck or whatever vehicle I have, I don't also want to sleep in it. I want to get away from it, So I always bring a tent, which sets up really fast. And often it turns out I just set the tent up and that's where I sleep. And that's also convenient in case you need to use your vehicle during the day. You don't want to tear your whole camp down in order to do that. You can just drive away and come back, and your tent and your table and awning and everything is still there. So, I mean, different people have different preferences here, but, yeah. So whether we're using, I thought about this because you were talking about leveling the truck out and everything. So yeah, if you're sleeping in the truck, the leveling's great. You have the spare tire to deal with. And if you're sleeping in a tent, well, that's got nothing to do with the truck. You just look for a level spot to do that.
Excellent. Well, I think we covered quite a bit here, Gene. Is there anything that maybe I didn't ask and I should have?
You didn't ask how my range was doing, because I remember I was so pleased. I was getting 3 miles per kilowatt, which is like extraordinary. That was what I was getting up to the point we had talked last time. This trip that I went on, because it involved some 65 mile an hour and 70 mile an hour driving, and under much extreme colder temperatures, for instance, I did less than that, but I'm still at about 2.8 miles per kilowatt. This is sort of important because it would be easy for a truck to only go 2 miles per kilowatt. And if you throw that into, say, a 1,000 or 2,000 mile road trip you're going on, that makes a big difference in how long you sit at a charger, and a big difference in how much you spend on electricity. And I just always believe in trying to have anything that uses energy in the world be as efficient as it can be, only because there's only so much to go around,
Yeah.
And we do have the climate to remember. Even though we're driving on electricity, the more electricity that you use, if you use excessive electricity, someone's going to have to generate that. So I would mention that. I would really like to mention, I even made a note to it, that the suspension on the Cybertruck is so much more comfortable, and the seat's so much more comfortable than my Model Y and even my friends' Model X's. It's really a luxury. And when I got home from that trip, which was a total of about almost 1,000 miles, I got out of that and got into my Model Y, which normally feels fabulous. It felt like driving a dump truck or something. I just felt like every crack in the road. So the cool thing on the Cybertruck is that it is super comfortable. I would just use it as a daily driver, except for the fact that it uses a fair amount more electricity than the Model Y does. That's really the only reason why I just don't drive it always.
Nice. And how was the charging in and around Bishop?
That's really great. They covered 395 really well. Lone Pine was one of the really early chargers they put in. There's a town south of Lone Pine called Mojave, which is a town of like maybe 3,000 people, but it has, no kidding, 3, or is it 4? It has 4 charging locations, 4 of them. So most people are charging up on that long drive in Mojave, and that took off a lot of the charging crowds at Lone Pine, which is maybe 100 miles north of that. And then 100 miles north of that is Bishop, which has 2 locations with a total of probably 30 or 35 stalls. So yeah, it's great there. Tesla covered it really well for an area that's not traveled heavily.
Excellent. And I know I asked you this last time, so I'm going to ask you again. Is there any place that you would like to promote or push people to find out more about what you're doing? Because I sent you a message this weekend, and you're like, "Oh, I'm at this solar event." You're doing a lot. So, what would you like to promote?
May I promote the solar a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. Please do.
Okay. So I'm in California, and I know you have listeners all over the place. But the Public Utilities Commission, which is supposed to protect the public from the activities of the for-profit utilities, is supposed to control our rates a little bit. Anyway, it's been a war zone in California of the public utilities, they're private public utilities. Like Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, and PG&E. Those would be the 3 companies that are for profit. They have been fighting rooftop solar, something fierce in California. And when our governor came into office, he fired many members of the California Public Utilities Commission who were supposed to look out after the public's good, that we're not overcharged and whatnot. He fired all those people, and he basically put in lackeys from the utilities. And they've been changing the rules on us in insane ways and really killing rooftop solar. The utilities love to make their own electricity with solar and sell it to us, but they don't like us to have it on our roofs and make our own. And at this point, they've been so successful, the installations of solar in California, which used to be a model state for this, is down by 80%. And there's more than 18,000 solar employees, solar installers, who have lost their jobs. And many, many companies have gone out of business. This is actually something that's starting in California. It started a little bit in Nevada and Arizona, but they're pushing it in a big way in California because they'd like to do this the entire country over. This is something that's really great. If you're in California, contact your legislators. There are things that they can do to reverse these acts. And actually, Bodhi, I was hoping, I mentioned to you in an email, maybe you can edit this out if you want people to hear about it. But I have a couple people, if you would like to interview them sometime and talk about this whole issue in depth.
Yeah, I would love to have them on. But Gene, thank you so much for coming on and discussing this. I think it's really informative, and I think people are going to get a lot out of this. So let's see here. Do you have any social media?
I don't.
Okay. We'll just call it good. Thank you.
Yeah, nowhere to put links on. Not related to this. I'm a musician, so I've got other stuff. Yeah.
All right. I want to thank Gene for coming on and being so generous with his time. Gene's a lot of fun to chat with, as you can tell. I sure hope you learned a lot, because I did. But again, thank you, Gene, for coming on and participating in the show. All right, everybody. That is it for me this episode. Hope y'all have a wonderful next couple of days. I don't even know what day this episode's coming out on. Hope you all are doing really well, and I will talk to you soon.